if we even put half as much mechanization into plant-based meat production as we have into animal meat production, we would go farther, faster, replace meat on a large scale. And so that was the philosophy behind starting Seattle Food Tech, and then later Rebellyous Foods came to be.
You're listening to What Fuels You, where we deep dive with CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business leaders to learn more about their stories and uncover nuggets of wisdom we can all use. I'm your host, Shauna Swerland, CEO of Fuel Talent, an award-winning recruiting firm based in Seattle. Today's guest on the What Fuels You podcast is Christie Lagally. Christie is the founder and CEO of Rebellyous Foods, a food production technology company working to make plant-based meat price competitive with animal-based meat. Lagally began her career in the aerospace industry, working on testing, designing, and manufacturing commercial airplanes at Boeing. Now at Rebellyous, she focuses on designing novel manufacturing equipment that addresses the two most significant obstacles facing the plant-based meat industry: cost and quality at scale. Welcome, Christie. So good to see you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here with you.
Yeah, I've been wanting to have you on for a long time, from when I first met you, I think it was maybe last year at the GeekWire Awards. And your company is just so impressive. I loved preparing for the interview. And I'm going to hit you first with some rapid fire. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. What is your favorite breed of dog?
No breed. I love the mixed breeds.
You love the mixed breeds. Do you have a dog?
I have two dogs. They are both mixed breeds. I have a puggle, mountain dog of some sort, and I always say the front half is puggle, the front half is beagle, and the last half is puggle, or pug, I guess.
Oh, I love that.
And then I have a some sort of whippet Chihuahua, I don't know, greyhound cross. She runs really fast.
What are their names?
Leia is my tall dog, and the greyhoundish one. And then Barney is my puggle cross of some sort. And
those are such cute names.
They're both 13 going on 14 years old, and they're good dogs.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I'm on the fence around getting a second dog, because I feel like it'll keep my 7-year-old dog young.
Yeah.
Active.
Oh, I think multiple dogs is a great idea if it's the right thing for you and your family.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Okay, so is there a book that you have read more than once, or that you find yourself often recommending to others?
Oh, yes. I am such a big fan of Jim Collins' Great by Choice. Jim Collins, of course, is a world-renowned researcher into the effectiveness and impactfulness of businesses and how they made business change the world long-term. So, companies like General Mills or Southwest Airlines, things that transform the industry, usually for the better. And he wrote a number of books, but Great by Choice was probably my absolute favorite. But there were really good nuggets of wisdom throughout his series of books and research on building good businesses that make a difference.
Okay, I earmarked that one. I just put a note to myself. I'm going to check it out.
Great.
What is your favorite source of protein beside Rebellyous?
Oh, I am a tofu connoisseur. I love tofu.
Firm, the extra firm?
Everything. I'll take anything and everything. It doesn't even have to be made out of soy. I love garbanzo bean tofu, pea protein tofu. You can make tofu out of a lot of different things, and there's a whole kind of YouTube genre videos that teaches you how to do that. I don't cook myself, but I love it when I do get a chance to buy other types of tofu from different protein sources.
Yeah. And is there some sort of app on your phone that you find yourself I could never live without this app?
Oh, gosh. An app on my phone. I just started, I would say I feel like now I couldn't live without it, but I just started I got this app called Aura for mental health, mindfulness, meditation, progressive relaxation. And right now it is my absolute favorite app. It's,
is it
I use
the
it
Aura
every
Ring?
day. I don't know. I think it's just a coincidence that they're named similarly, but it's an app that has everything from like mental health support to, talk therapy to, just everything you can imagine when it comes to, just listening for mental health purposes. So it even has stories
Yeah.
so you can go to sleep by,
Oh,
things like that. It's really
is
great.
it AURA?
That's right. AURA.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
check it out.
Another nugget from you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Do you have a hidden talent?
Oh goodness. It's not very hidden, but it's definitely not very out there as I'm a ballet dancer and I have danced for oh gosh, 28 years now. And it just I don't know if it's a talent, but it is something that I am proud of. I just don't do it in public. So I guess that's a
Are you
hidden
doing it
talent.
are you actively doing it now, like in
Yeah.
classes?
Yeah, I take
Oh,
class
that's
once or
really
twice a
cool.
week. And there's a whole group here in Seattle, of a community of people who do, adult ballet on a pretty regular basis. So you get to know
I
pretty much
have to
everyone.
say, oh yeah, I would imagine that you're in incredible shape. I did ballet for a split second, I mean several years, but as a little girl, and it's tiring.
It's
You have
tiring,
to be
yeah.
in really good shape. It's hard. That's impressive. That's really
You
impressive.
gotta keep it up.
You'll stay
That's
lean.
thanks.
Oh yeah. Is there a favorite music genre?
Oh goodness. I don't have a favorite genre, but I'm a pretty big fan of Lizzo. I don't know, somehow she just embodies what I feel in a day. And then I absolutely loved. You have to check out the Barbie album if you haven't already.
Yes.
If you love the Barbie movie, the Barbie album was even more fun. So maybe
Yeah, I
not a
have to check it
genre,
out.
but it's definitely worth it. It's on Spotify.
Okay, I'm putting that down. And is there a dream place in your abundant spare time that you want to go visit? It's on your bucket list.
Oh, yeah. I've been wanting to get back to Hawaii. I've only been there once in my life, and that seems like a fairly simple thing to do from Seattle. But I always seem to be kind of tied down by dogs. So I just want to get to Hawaii one of these days, hopefully this year. So
Yeah.
I guess
I have
that's
an
the big.
amazing woman who takes care of my dogs if you ever need.
Oh, that would be
Um,
fantastic. Okay.
well, my dog, I don't know why I said dogs, my dog. But I've referred her to a few friends, and so that's why I
I
said
would
dogs,
love that.
plural. Yeah, she's
Yeah.
great. Or Rover's awesome. I had the founder, Great Goddess Men, on here, and people have had a lot of success. So you
Yeah.
need to get to Hawaii. That's your 2024 goal.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, cool. So tell me, you grew up in Golden, Colorado, I know.
That's right.
Tell me more about that area and your upbringing with all sorts of animals.
Yeah. So yeah, I grew up in Golden, Colorado with my mom and my two sisters and my grandmother. And yeah, we had a couple of dogs, a couple of cats, a couple of rabbits at times. We had horses, which was a very common thing. Oftentimes people had horses, they either took care of other people's horses and so I was around animals most of the time, one way or the other. And and then there was at that time Golden, Colorado was much more of an agricultural town than it is now, having gone back at one point 20 years later after when I was around, I don't know, 40 or so, I guess, or in my late 30s. And I found it to be such a modern place. I was so shocked because even when I left Colorado in like 1993, they were still walking horses down the middle of the road.
Oh,
so
that's cool. I kind
so
of think that would be amazing to be raised like that.
yeah, so I mean, it's like maybe a crossover time in society where I did not see that going back. It's much more of a modern
Yeah.
place to live now. But
And how old were
it's
you when you moved to California? How old were you
yeah,
then?
I moved to California when I was 17. I actually went and lived with friends and graduated from high school and went to college in California. And so yeah, I actually graduated high school in California, but it was but I left Colorado at that time and I went to live in East Bay of the Bay Area.
What made you do that?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of a little bit of a tough story. My family was in a little bit of family was actually in a kind of a big crisis. My family was struggling with a couple of people's mental health issues, and honestly, just didn't really have a place to live anymore. And so I went and lived with friends for a while. Well, I went and lived with friends in California, and it's kind of the best thing to do at that point. I took the dog, and because I love animals at that point. So the best thing for us was just to kind of divide and conquer. And so I went and lived with friends, and a couple of my family members stayed home, and my older sister had already left home, and so it was just the kind of necessity to kind of get
Yeah.
some help from other people.
When you think back on that time, were you just kind of in like survival mode, or were you kind of young and ambitious?
Oh no, it was very much in survival mode. To share a little bit more, my mother was struggling with mental health and had been for a very long time, and my younger sister was partially disabled, and then my older sister had already gone off to college, so I was more than anything else, it was survival mode, just trying to get everybody into a kind of a secure place. And after that was kind of settled, I decided to go live with friends. So, I never thought about it as an ambitious question. It was definitely a brave one. I packed everything I had in a little car that I had at the time that was two-door Mazda 323 and drove it across, well, halfway across the country, and
Yeah.
started high school about a week later after that. So
Yeah, interesting. I feel like, as a mom, and there's so many things out there right now about, I mean, it always have been about parenting and just kind of what you want for your kids. And I think like resilience and like what you showed through that is something that's really hard to teach. And I'm curious if you would attribute some of that pain to your drive and success. Like sometimes when you hear these types of stories, it's a little bit like you are where you are in spite of it
yeah,
all. It wasn't likely to happen, right? To
yeah.
just like here you are as CEO of a company that's raised millions of dollars, very visible.
Hmm.
What do you owe that to? Or when you think about it, does it feel
Yeah.
like, of course I am, or does it feel like an accident? Like
It
what
doesn't
would you
feel like
say?
it. Of course, I am. That's for sure. Yeah. It feels like, well. So I mean, I feel like I learned self sufficiency from a very young age. Both my parents struggled with very, very serious mental health issues, and I most of my growing up was taking care of other family members, even as a very young child. And so, I did that till I basically couldn't anymore. And but in terms of like taking care of myself, I just learned self sufficiency from a very, very young age. Um, Perhaps, sometimes I think, okay, well, maybe that's why I would succeed in a startup, and I guess time will tell. But the it definitely sets you up for, well, you can try big things, and if you fail, you only have yourself to blame, you know, and but I don't know if it necessarily was what motivated me to like start a company. I actually really wanted to go work for a company that felt like I was using my skills to make an impact in the world. And I had, I ended up going to school to become first in psychology and then later in mechanical engineering. And that that really set me up for like all of those things I was doing because I wanted to be contribute positively to the world. I don't know why. I just I felt like
That's just
that
who
was
you
my
were.
goal. It was
Yeah.
just my goal in life. And also I just saw so much suffering around me. I really wanted to do something about it. I also feel like I kind of owe the world the benefit of being a good citizen and being a contributor to the positive state of the world, in part because I actually feel really lucky. I'm lucky in health, and in a lot of ways, I'm actually pretty lucky overall in family. I know that there were many people that I lived on either sides of me in Colorado and other parts of times in my life that had it much, much, much worse. And, that that's a really painful thing to see kind of on either side of your life, whether they be, kids being abused by their parents or animals being abused by their owners or things like that. All of these things stuck deeply in me to want to do something about it. And I think that's one of the hardest learnings in life, is that a lot of people don't realize that it actually helps the pain that we feel around these issues to actually do something about it. Sometimes,
100%. Give you a sense of purpose, for sure.
A sense of purpose, and in a lot of ways, sense of even a little bit of control. Even when I'm feeling like, oh my God, I don't know how to help this particular issue, even donating makes a big difference. It like puts me in a place where I'm like, okay, at least I'm doing something, right? But I would say, I also wanted to be able to grow and make a bigger impact, which is why I, really got learning about the books of Jim Collins and other companies that have, changed the world in some way, because there are a lot of big problems out there, and the more you become aware of them, the bigger you realize they are, and the more it's harder to feel like you're actually going to be able to do something about it. And of course, you may not be able to do about anything about most things, but that doesn't really negate our perhaps our moral conscience around doing something. And contributing to a positive good.
100%. And so you, as a student transitioning, whole new school, new environment, without your family, living with friends, were you, I think I'm like rebellious. Did you ever rebel? Or were you...
I did not. There was no one to
like
rebellious.
Your role and right. But sometimes it's, in a family dynamic there, everyone has their role. And it sounds like you kind of took over as like the like mama bear of the whole place, like kind of keeping all the wheels in motion, which oftentimes can serve really well as a CEO, because you're so used to, surprises and not knowing necessarily what's around the corner, and just doing like constantly making sure that everyone has what they need. I think that it can lead to a really good kind of traits to show up as with your leadership style. How did you decide to pursue Sonoma State?
Well, Sonoma State University, I actually went to community college before I went to Sonoma State, so I wasn't there very long. It was only like 2 years or something like that. So, I have a lot of fond memories of going to the community college, being that I didn't have a family dynamic around me, and I didn't have, somebody to sign off on my financial aid form or anything like that. Nobody could do that for me. So I went to community college first, and I actually did really, really well there. That turned out to be a good idea. I actually took everything from vocational classes to, academic classes. And then when I finished at the community college, I went on to Sonoma State. I still had a very only vague idea of maybe what I wanted to do in the world. And I ended up choosing psychology just because I found education, and I still find education to be very unnatural. I don't read very well, and I've always had kind of a disability around reading, and I don't sit in classes all that well. And so you're
like a very typical CEO.
I guess so.
You're like, that's like the quintessential like textbook entrepreneur.
I didn't know that. But
oh yeah, very typical.
I chose psychology because I could graduate with psychology. And I wasn't even that into psychology. I was like, well, I learned a lot of this when I was, managing my mother through the mental health care system. But yes. But I found organizational psychology, like business psychology, how businesses work better. And I ended up like kind of majoring officially in that. And even that, I was like, okay, that was fun, but I don't know what to do with it now. So as soon as I got out of college the first time, I almost immediately went back to the community college, got all my prerequisites over the years in night school before I could go back and finish my engineering degree. So I got that psychology degree first.
Did you have a sense of what you wanted to be when you grew up? And how did you pursue a career like right away?
I did not have a really good sense. In fact, I felt very lost, about where I wanted to go. But I was a really big fan of Star Trek, and both from a moral perspective, again, that kind of belief in what is the right thing to do. And Star Trek and Gene Roddenberry very much had this vision of our future where we could all be functioning and contributing and positive members of society. It also had that underlying, story of we don't eat animals anymore. We replicate it. And, so we didn't even have to kill animals in the Star Trek world. And I think probably one of the people who's influenced me the most was LeVar Burton's character, Geordie LaForge, because he was the engineer and the one that, fixed the ship every time it, got out of whack. And I loved that. I thought that was like so much fun. And I was always a little bit of a tinkerer and an inventor. And I think there were times when I did want to be an inventor. It kind of came and went. But there just wasn't a whole lot of like inspiration of that in my early life. So yeah. And that would have been, in the latter half of my high school career when Star Trek: The Next Generation was on television. So when I saw that, and then, as I got through college, which would have been the latter half of the season or the series, I was like, oh man, this is what I should be doing. I need to be a starship. Yeah, I went back to school. And, I didn't have to be like just, obviously I couldn't be a starship engineer, but, I thought maybe I would work for NASA. I thought maybe I could. I did not want to be an astronaut. I had no need to send me into space. I'm sure I would just fall apart. But an
aerospace engineer. That's amazing.
But an aerospace engineer. So I became an aerospace engineer, and I got to work on spacecraft and aircraft. I even worked briefly on the James Webb Space Telescope in the very early years, not in the later years. I got to work on the Boeing 777, the 787, the 777X. So I got to work on a lot of really fun projects in aerospace. All the while.
How did you get that? How did you get those jobs? Who hooked you up, or like, did you just apply cold, or did you network? How did that work?
I just applied for those jobs at Boeing.
That's
I don't
amazing.
Remember. I just remember going through the regular process, the application, they call you in and have an interview. That was all. Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember anything happening like that. Yeah. So it was good.
So a serious career as an aerospace engineer.
Yeah.
All the while, I know you said before we started recording that you've been a vegan for 29 years. What made you decide to give up animal products?
Yeah, I remember being around 14, 15 years old and learning about the dog meat trade in Korea, which is just, obviously horrific. Factory farming in general is horrific for animals, for sure. And I was just appalled. At that point, I was just like, how could we eat dogs? Here is my friend, I'm not going to eat a dog. And then, it didn't take me very long to rationalize that maybe eating animals was a morally questionable, thing that there's a reason people question it. There's a reason it comes up in, almost every major religion. And so it was my love of animals and my acceptance that they were whole beings, that I really didn't want to eat animals. So I was a vegetarian until I was about 19. And then, approximately or so. And when I was 17, I definitely became a vegetarian. And then when I was 19, I wrote a paper at the community college for a health class. And it was supposed to be about vegetarianism. And so I researched vegetarianism because I was just doing it because I didn't want to eat my friends. And when I researched it, I was like, oh, there's a real argument for veganism here, right? And I ended up writing it on the health impacts of veganism. And this would have been 1995.
Wow.
So at that point, I just became a vegan. Well, the crazy thing was, it was September of 1995. And it was like the first paper I was supposed to write. So it was like, class started in August. By September, I had finished this paper. And, I had always had severe respiratory and stomach issues my whole life, starting from about 4th grade onward. I didn't know what it was. No one, my family they did not see doctors. They did not believe in seeing doctors. So I'd never been to a doctor. And so I never, complained about my health issues. And so, I'll never forget, on Monday, I went vegan. and I never ate meat, dairy, or eggs again. Dairy and eggs was really what it was. And I actually seemed to not be able to digest eggs, so I was really just dairy. And by Friday, I had never had a respiratory or stomach issue again. So I was actually severely allergic to dairy, and actually later realized I was severely allergic to eggs too, and both allergic and what do you call it, lactose intolerant, which yeah, it just didn't agree with me. So I always say I'm like the poorest person to ask about how to go vegan because it was so easy for me. I was like, thank God.
Yeah, you're
thank
like,
God that's over.
Incredible. Yeah,
yeah.
You feel amazing.
Yeah, I felt it was like enlightenment. I never felt so good in my life. And at that point I was, 18, 19 years old. I was under 100 pounds. After I became vegan, I finally hit, maybe 105, 19, 110 maybe, I think. So, and I stayed at like 110 until I was latter part of my 30s. But it was just that was just how poor I was actually digesting food. It wasn't until after that, going vegan, that I could actually gain weight. So, yeah. So anyway, for me, it was, there are health, benefits for many, many reasons. But, now that we know so much more about the benefits of eating a good balanced vegan diet, of which I may or may not eat. I eat vegan, but I'm not sure how balanced it is sometimes.
Yeah. But how cool that you created a whole business around it. So tell me about the idea for Rebellyous Foods. Where did the idea come from? And the name. I love the name.
Yeah, thanks. So I actually started the company as Seattle Food Tech, and that is actually still our corporate name. Rebellyous Foods was added later, but I started Seattle Food Tech in 2017 based on this idea that I could see there was a really big gap in the production of meat alternatives. So if people wanted to eat less meat, one way to do that is to eat a meat lookalike, either tofu or a plant-based nugget or, a faux hamburger of some sort. And as those products become better and better over the years and decades since I became vegan and vegetarian, what has not happened is the price has not come down, and the quality sometimes was variable, and the volume was just not there. Like, people often just couldn't afford it. You certainly couldn't drive into a truck stop in the middle of Nevada and find a veggie burger. So I really looked at this from an engineer's perspective, and at Boeing Commercial Airplanes, I actually worked on manufacturing technology, where I was developing automated tools for the assembly of the aircraft wing. And I really learned a lot about manufacturing technology and the benefits it has for lowering the price of a product, in that case, the wing structure, but improving the quality at the same time. So those fundamentals of high quality, lower cost, safer operations, safer labor, were all the philosophies around manufacturing technology. And so, once I started to think, okay, well, I've had this career in aerospace, I want to go do something different. How can I take that theory forward? And manufacturing technology plus the, plant-based meat industry, well, they were almost a match made in heaven, because, we've been industrializing meat production to the point of the fact that, we kill over 60 billion animals on this planet every single year. And the reason we can do that with only 7 billion people, by the way, or almost 8 billion people, is because of automation and mechanization and manufacturing technology. And so I was like, well, if we even put half as much mechanization into plant-based meat production as we have into animal meat production, we would go farther, faster, replace meat on a large scale. And so that was the philosophy behind starting Seattle Food Tech. And Seattle Food Tech, eventually we got some traction, some funding for that. And we decided we needed to be a direct producer of high quality plant-based chicken products, and specifically do so for the public school system. I met a couple of people at the Humane Society of the United States, where I also volunteered when I still worked at Boeing. So Josh Balk and Christie Middleton were people that I met at the Humane Society, and they're like, somebody needs to make a plant-based chicken company that has low cost and high volume, can conserve the public school system. And so, I started putting one half of my brain together and the other half, and that was where Seattle Food Tech and then later Rebellyous Foods came to be. Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. And so when you said that you got some funding, how did you initially fund the business? I mean, even just setting up the business and hiring your first, who was your first hire?
Yeah, our first hire is actually an
All of that.
employee. Yeah, her name was, my first hire was a woman named Brenna Taylor, and she actually still is with the company. She's our senior supply chain and logistics manager. We've had great retention in our company, and Brenna is a good example of that. And she's also just done so much to build the company. But I mean, setting up the company is a matter of just filling out some paperwork. We incorporated as a C Corp and incorporated in Delaware. And then you're like, okay, what do we do now? And, it was a matter of just taking one step in front of the other, trying to figure, okay, what should we research? How do we research it? Where do we research it? Make product, figuring out how that goes together. It was very much one step in front of the other until things build on each other. And then, there are no, big flight steps, or, big miracles. I've never seen a miracle in 6.5 years, but it's really just building on each step and each day. But being a producer and a technology developer was probably the hardest thing we could have done, and it was also the best thing we could have done. Like I hesitate to even say that because it was so painful, but knowing what you're doing makes such a big difference. And so,
Right.
It's very tempting to just want to isolate the problem into like, oh, I can fix this one little problem. Or if I had an app, we could just fix this one little problem. Well, we weren't working on a little problem. We were working on industrializing plant-based meat production so it hit price parity so we could feed a public school system, And, that's when I've learned over the years that certainly those hard steps forward are not going to be, they're not going to be fun all the time.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you this one story. When I was at Boeing, there's a test pilot at Boeing. Her name is Christie Walsh, and she started out as an engineer and wanted to be a captain, a test pilot. And she spoke at Boeing, and one of the things that she did to work her way up to various different roles to go from an engineer to a test pilot, which is a big jump, by the way, is to just take all of these, whatever jobs she had to do that. And that was really the approach I had to take. The advice was do the job no one else wants to do. And every step of the way, I would say we have done the job that no one else wants to do. A lot of people say they don't want to do production. Well, I don't blame them. It is hard. And a lot of people say that, well, I don't want to do like hardware work. I've had entrepreneurs say that. And I was like, well, that's true. You could also work in the software arena, but hardware is as hard as it sounds. So we had to work in food, we worked in hardware, the problems we're solving, oftentimes we have to say, look, we're not tunneling neutrinos here, and we're not changing things massively. But when you're dealing with hardware and real world changes, you have to kind of go in smaller steps, but you make a huge impact in the end. Because otherwise it's very, very hard to move a physical industry in a different direction. Unlike software, where you can make a really big difference just by diverting users from one platform to another.
100%. So there were two questions I wanted to come back to because I didn't get, how did you come up with the name Rebellyous?
Oh, Rebellyous.
And then also the funding, like that initial funding, I guess your seed round.
Yeah.
How did you get, I guess basically tell me a little bit about that fundraising process, because to date, I know you've raised 30 million. Is that
That's
right?
Yeah, that's right.
And so I'm super curious, like, what are the factors that have attracted investors to you?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started raising, and I'll answer the fundraising first because that's chronologically before Rebellious Foods. But when I first started fundraising, it was around manufacturing technology for plant-based meat production. And so basically, I just started pitching, and I was very unsuccessful for quite a long time. And then every once in a while, you'd find somebody who are like, okay, I actually get what you're doing, because of course, most people have never been in a factory. And so that was a really hard issue around Seattle food tech was like, so what are you going to do? But, hardware for production of plant-based meat was definitely a hard concept. But you know what? The trick to fundraising, especially if trick to fundraising a hard concept, is to do it over and over and over again and take feedback every single time. So, I mean, I have a database of, 600 to maybe 800 meetings. And I'm not talking emails, I'm talking meetings where I have pitched over 6.5 years. So it adds up. I mean, after you've done 10, 12, 20, 40, 60, 80 in 3 months, over 6 years, you do end up doing it a lot. And just taking that feedback each and every time, refining your business model, having the right answer at the right time, making sure you have a good business model that makes sense, all of those things. And then taking the small checks when you get them and getting started is another really good way of doing it. And then it kind of builds on itself as you're more and more successful.
Yeah.
And then the name Rebellyous Foods, I'll just start over. The name Rebellyous Foods actually comes from where it should come from. It was a really good marketing firm. So we love the name.
Because I see the belly. I saw the belly in it, and I'm like, oh, that's perfect. Like, especially with when you were saying like you healed your belly from Monday to a Friday. You're like, I'm all better.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
I love that. And tell me about the business model. You mentioned like have a good business model. What is your business model? And I want to get into kind of the vision, the mission, all of that.
Sure. So Rebellyous Foods and our corporate name, Seattle Food Tech, exists to make plant-based meat available and affordable for everyone. So we do that by designing and deploying automated food processing equipment that we custom built ourselves. Essentially, we went back to first principles of engineering and we designed the right equipment for the job. So almost all plant-based meat today, even today, is made in off-the-shelf meat processing equipment in meat processing facilities. So almost all your veggie burgers and chicken nuggets are being made, right next door to a line that's also processing animal meat. But honestly, if you can imagine how you deconstruct a chicken into a nugget, it is very different than how you take proteins from a plant and turn them into a plant-based chicken nugget. And so we decided we needed to go back to the drawing board and design the right equipment for the job. And that's what we've been doing for 6 years. We designed a system that was first called the Mach 1 and then the Mach 1S, and now we're deploying the Mach 2. And that system automates all the most laborious and difficult parts of turning that plant-based protein into a plant-based chicken nugget. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so when you first started talking about it, you said food tech. And when I was prepping, I was like, okay, we got food tech, we got agri-tech. And I also know that you, in your mind, it's also a climate tech company.
Yeah.
So at what point in your life, like let's go back now, was it around the same time of becoming a vegan? Did you become like an environmentalist or like caring about the world and the climate?
Yeah,
your impact.
I would say I became an environmentalist as a kid. I remember issues of climate change being well on my mind as a 7, 8, 9-year-old. So I was always thinking recycling is what I had to do. So I was always trying to recycle and drive less and things like that. But as a climate tech company, food tech is a very big, broad concept of trying to figure out how do we make food better. Climate tech is about understanding we need a lot of solutions to address the amount of CO2 and methane that are being emitted into the atmosphere that are forcing climate change. Right now, we have a lot of interesting solutions to address things like coal burning versus, solar opportunities to address that. But in the meat industry, we produce, for example, 108 billion pounds of animal meat in the United States alone. We kill over 9 billion animals in the U.S., 60 billion globally. In fact, in the whole world, annually, we produce over 771 billion pounds of animal meat. Of that, only less than about 0.5% or even less, like it can be as much as 0.2% accounts for plant-based meat. So we have a long way to go when it comes to how much meat we need to replace by either meat analogs or just people reducing their meat consumption. And so what we're working on at Rebellyous Foods is taking that automated technology and making it a viable path forward for plant-based meat production in the existing meat processing facilities that we have today. So we strongly believe at Rebellyous Foods that conversion of meat production towards plant-based meat production through better equipment is a path forward to address climate change. Because once you do that, then you have a cost parity product for consumers, better products for consumers, more available products for consumers. And consumers make a lot of choices, but one of their biggest beefs, no pun intended, pun intended, is that plant-based meat costs too much and there isn't enough of it. So that's the issue we're dealing with, but we have to deal with it on a production level first before consumers are going to benefit. Mm-hmm.
So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding, because in my mind it's a product, but we're talking about the manufacturing part. So when you have customers, I know that you've got the schools. I wrote it down. I can't remember how many schools, but like crazy. Your numbers are incredible. I don't know how many schools you are in.
Yeah,
but it was a crazy number.
Yeah, we are in over 210 major school districts nationwide. And we reach almost 3.5 million school kids. There are over 16,400 school districts, so we've got a long way to go, but we do have quite a distribution at this point. So essentially, the way that you prove technology works is you actually use it. You do what you say you're going to do with it. And so it can be a little bit confusing, but Rebellyous is a production technology company. On one side of the coin, we are developing the technology for manufacturing, and on the other side, we're using it to make products. And that is our business model to connect to the world. We sell those products to the USDA National School Lunch Program in school districts across the United States. And these are fairly simple products. They're just very well made because we obviously care a lot about our recipe and our ingredients and things like that. But by making them through using automated technology, we're lowering the cost and making them much more available to, frankly, one of our most price-sensitive markets, which is our public schools. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And I also read that plant-based chicken is the second fastest growing category in the plant-based sector. Yeah. How are you going to be positioning yourselves to capitalize on this growth? And as somebody who, I pay attention, but not obviously. This is the world that you eat, breathe, and sleep. What should we expect broadly in this sector, in the plant-based meat industry?
Yeah, so the plant-based meat industry, frankly, has tons of room to grow no matter what. There's other issues that we need in order to make those things grow, and one of those is price parity with animal meat. So if you think about it, if we're only producing 0.1% of that 771 billion pounds of animal meat globally, your biggest competition is not other plant-based meat companies. Your biggest competition is animal meat. And so getting to price parity is absolutely critical, but you can't take quality down. You can't take taste down. It has to be the highest quality product you've ever tried, and you got to make sure that's available to the school district. And that's where production automation makes a difference. In fact, that's why chicken is cheap. So one of the fastest growing segment of the plant-based meat industry is the chicken industry. Well, that's also because chicken is the fastest growing segment of the meat industry. So as people want more of these products, as more and more people eat more meat, and meat continues to grow globally, despite the warnings around climate change and the emissions from this industry, you're going to see that particular segment grow kind of in parallel.
Yeah. But it sounds like you as a company are making huge strides towards price parity. Are there other companies, are you kind of aligned with other people in this space to kind of work toward a common goal, or is there a lot of competition?
There is not.
Are you working, is there a community that's like, hey guys, these are our broad goals for leaving our mark on humanity? Or is it, we're going to be first and there's a lot of competition and it's kind of...
I have not run into a lot of competition around price parity. It's a pretty tough thing to do. So most people are really just trying to get their company stable. And, there have been plant-based meat companies that have definitely come and gone in our own lifetime. And I would say, mostly we're in competition with the animal meat industry. So I wouldn't say that there's a limited number of consumers that are limited by, okay, these are the people who eat plant-based meat. We all have to kind of vie for that's just not the way it is, you know. There is much more. I do feel like we have a good community of large and small companies that are willing to work together, collaborate, you know, cross-pollinate in some cases. You know, one of my favorite cross-pollinations that I've ever seen is the Notco company working with Kraft Foods on a wide variety of product development to make them plant-based. So I think there's going to be a lot more of that in the future. And, you know, we've got bigger problems than just competition against another plant-based meat company. We've got to address climate change. We've got to address profitability and price parity. So there isn't a lot of point in being too competitive with another plant-based meat company, especially because there's plenty of room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So from a manufacturing standpoint, you mentioned Mach 1 and then Mach 2. Mm-hmm. What is the difference between the two? And then also, can you talk to me a little bit about the patents on...
We have an extensive patent portfolio that covers the Mach 1 and the Mach 2, and this is technology that hydrates, what's called emulsifies oils, waters, and starch, which is basically just the same as making salad dressing, and then does final mixing to create the plant-based meat dough, which is the meat inside of a chicken nugget or something like that. So that technology, the Mach 1 was and still is our pilot scale system. It did about 150 pounds an hour. And then we scaled that up over time, figuring out how we could make it bigger and bigger. And then the Mach 2 is the commercial scale version of the Mach 1. The Mach 2 does 2,500 pounds an hour minimum. It can go up to about 3,750 pounds per hour. So that's, 10 to 15 million pounds per year of plant-based chicken products. And so with those kinds of scales, you can imagine, testing is a big ordeal. But that is the solution we need, right? Like, when it comes to industrial scale problems, you need industrial scale solutions. And that was our goal. It was not our goal to be a mom and pop chicken nugget company. It was our goal to be an industrial scale producer so that we could serve our favorite school districts. So we could serve LA Unified and Austin School District and Memphis, Tennessee. Those school districts, buy truckloads from us. And those are the schools that would not otherwise have plant-based meat if it wasn't for being able to produce at large scale. And that's the goal of the Mach 2. Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. And when I went on your website, first of all, I love it. I think it's got great branding. But I read some metrics or statistics that I thought were crazy impressive. So it says 90% reduction in production workforce costs through automation. Mm-hmm. Tell me if these are accurate, because sometimes I'll tell people, they're like, we got to get that up to date. It's actually 93%. 80% reduction in energy costs by eliminating the need for chilled environment. Mm-hmm. 1/3 of the footprint on the production floor versus current production methods. Mm-hmm. 1/4 reduction in sanitation staff, reducing labor costs. 99% reduction in material waste through continuous production. 95% elimination of rework for work in progress with quality at scale breakthrough. Mm-hmm. Like, everything is like, wow. I was pretty impressed by that.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. One of the things that has been an utter joy in being kind of the first company that did manufacturing technology for plant-based meat is I hope one day we have like 5 companies that are competing with us for this. But we definitely got the pleasure of like pulling the lowest fruit off the vine because it was really hard to invent the Mach 1 and the Mach 2, but it wasn't hard as like what the next thing we have to do is, because one thing that every plant-based meat company has wanted is to convert their batch processing to continuous processing. And that was like the bare minimum of what we did. So we took that one, we ran with it, we patented it in multiple countries. And then we did everything else we needed to do, from, equipment level chilling to continuous hydration to everything that was like, okay, let's just fix all these problems that people would, when an operator would rather kill chickens and process chickens than do plant-based meat, that just gives you that gives you an idea of how hard it is to make plant-based meat for the operator. It's so much easier, and there's so many more tools to process chicken. We want to make it so the operator's like, you know what? plant-based meat is much nicer to produce. Now we've got these automated pieces of equipment. I want to convert my facility into a plant-based meat facility. And that's the day we're looking for, is to be that industrial enabler.
Yeah, that would be incredible. I have to say, starting in 2017 and then 3 years later, we go into COVID. Your first time CEO, you're getting recognized as a great leader and you're an innovator. Having done recruiting for 30 years, I can say that candidates more than ever during the last 3 years have been very, there's been a shift in their drivers, right? It's not always just, hey, can you get me more money? And there's been a huge shift towards working in an area that they're passionate about, or where they can make a real impact or a lasting impact on the world, whether it's the environment or an issue that they care deeply about. How has it been for you recruiting employees who share your passion around plant-based foods and animal welfare and the climate and all that? Do you make that kind of the number one criterion? Or is it skill set first, and then, by the way, this is also super cool if you are interested?
So I would say it definitely has to be a balance. I mean, mission is what's required to stick with hard problems that make an impact. And impact, people want to feel like they're spending, a good portion of their lives at work making an impact, doing something better for the world, just like I did in my earlier days too. And there are a lot of ways to do that. But as climate change is bearing down on us, I think more and more people want to use that skill set to do something about it. It's, again, we talked earlier about it can address your emotional trauma around things like climate change or animal welfare or human health, to actually do something about it, to spend your working hours, do something about it. So the value of, mission is that you can stick with it through hard things. And we have seen some very hard things, because hardware is hard. Things break, things fall off trucks, things explode. I mean, it's crazy what can happen. And, obviously safety is always first, but you have to power through some of those things. And mission is what helps you get through those things. But the other side of mission is that satisfaction of impact, being able to wake up in the morning and feel like your existence is being used in a way that really will fulfill your soul to do something about the world's problems. So, mission matters a lot. However, at the same time, It's not always the right fit. Maybe animal rescue is the right way to go. Maybe being a climate change campaigner is the right way. So I always say, gosh, if you want to be in a startup, it's more than just mission, because you got to have some serious grit.
Serious grit. What makes somebody successful at Rebellyous? Are there traits that are hey, we've seen a common thread among our, very successful employees?
Yeah, I would just say mostly that grit plus the mission. When you put those together, it usually works out really, really well. And I think that, we have this opportunity to kind of come together and work together for long term as well. Rebellyous is a very stable company, and, we've got a good solid future ahead of us. So I think when startups come with a lot of risk, but we're hoping to, make sure that people who bring that mission and grit, can also feel like they have a long future with us. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what are the long-term plans for Rebellyous Foods? Are there new products you can talk about, or any sort of expansion plans in the pipeline? I
don't think I'm allowed to talk about new products yet, but we do have some new products coming. And mostly we're going to be deploying them in the school lunch program. So unless you're in the 5th grade, you probably won't get to try them. But we are going to be deploying the Mach 2 production system. We are going to be, bringing our costs even more in line with what the school districts need. And we will be expanding, hopefully building a Mach 3, maybe even a Mach 4 production system to really expand out the impact we can make with our technology. So what that means is that if you're an engineer and you love to invent things and you love to create things and you love to deploy and get real world work done, Rebellyous is a hard boots on the ground or hardcore boots on the ground opportunity to really move the needle on making an impact. And there's no doubt, we run a real life facility every single day and we do research every single day. So it's tough, but it's also tough with that feel good kind of tough,
I'm super excited to watch you, Christie, continue to build this. It's such a cool company. But separately, we started talking about Aura and the app and how you kind of might use it to preserve your mental health. What do you do? What's your go-to to unwind or to just be like, I got to check out because you can't be 24/7 trying to solve this.
Yeah. I mean, I love taking my dogs for a walk. We do a lot of hiking. And I love doing that. Even in the rain, I have gotten a lot of little raincoats for them.
Oh, you have to tell me because I ordered one for my dog and it ripped. So the company was really cool. They sent me a new one. And then yesterday it ripped again.
Oh, no.
I'll send you a picture so you can see that. But I need a good coat for my dog because I always talk myself out of taking her out in the rain. So yeah, send it to me.
I have a tip for you. Goodwill.
Yes.
Try Goodwill. You might find there are a lot of doggy raincoats at Goodwill and you can just buy them for $1 and just see which ones work.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I've bought a lot of doggy raincoats at Goodwill. And a lot of doggy sweaters and stuff like that. So
great.
But what was your question? I'm sorry. It was like,
I was just asking about unwinding. So you go for a hike and you wear the dog coat and you go in the rain. And then what about when you're thinking about, it's Sunday, you're thinking about your week ahead. Yeah. How do you kind of get your mind around setting yourself up for success and productivity?
Yeah. I mean, I always do yoga on Sunday, if not almost every day. But Sunday, I always make sure I do that. And then actually, I try to always work 8 hours ahead of my team. This is kind of like a CEO trick. So every Sunday night I sit down and either we have this thing called the Sunday night email that everybody gets a little update on the company, where things at, and reminds them where we're at. Celebrates all of our successes from the week before and the week to come. Sometimes I send that out. Sometimes my chief of staff sends it out. And then I just work to really have that thought leadership forward, to really make sure that we're hearing, seeing where we're going to be going in the future, because it's a startup, right? We have to constantly pick every single day how we are going to move forward. And that's what makes it exciting. That's what makes it like a non-traditional kind of job. But it also means that we got to think about it a lot. That's what I usually spend my Sunday nights doing that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so my ultimate question for you is, what fuels you?
Oh, what fuels me? Mission fuels me more than anything else. I took a survey of my CEO, health or whatever it was called, and at a retreat recently, and we had to fill out forms about are you sleeping enough, and are you eating enough, and are you getting enough exercise? And I was kind of moderate on some of them. But when I was filling out the portion about, do you feel like your life has meaning? Do you feel like, you get up in the morning and you're motivated by what you want to go do? This fulfills you. That I remember just checking 5 on all the boxes.
Oh,
and
that's
just
awesome.
Feeling like, okay, this one's definitely got settled. So I am fueled by the mission, and I'm fueled by my commitment to see if there's a better way forward and make a better way forward, build the change we want to see in the world, as we say at Rebellyous, not just be the change, but build the change we want to see in the world. And so that is what fuels me, is getting to do this and getting to do it with all the amazing people at Rebellyous.
Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. If you'd like to check out past episodes to hear from more business leaders, go to fueltalent.com/podcast. And if you have a minute, please leave a review and rating on your favorite podcast app, or share this episode with a friend or colleague. Please share any feedback or interview suggestions for other guests by sending a message to podcast@fueltalent.com. I'm Shauna Swerland, and thanks again for listening.